Everyone, welcome. See, as y'all are coming in, feel free to send a message in the chat, which is located at the bottom of your screen, letting us know maybe who you are, where you're zooming in from. If you're an incoming graduate student or current student at Rice, let us know what year and department or college. And we'll get started in just a few moments. Hi, Crystal, welcome, welcome. And if you'd like your message, so I forgot to mention, if you want to send a message that can be seen by all attendees, make sure you select all panelists and attendees, because we want to make sure everyone can see where everyone's calling in. Awesome. Welcome, Carolyn. Congrats on starting your PhD program. Awesome. Hi, Crystal. Great. Well, it is 12:02 and we've got a jam-packed agenda, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for being here today for our virtual alumni panel, Life After Rice, How to Succeed in Graduate School. It's sponsored by the Association of Rice Alumni and presented in partnership with the Graduate Student Association and the Office of Graduate and Postdoctoral Studies at Rice. If you've never been to a Life After Rice event before, it helps bring the Rice community together for an interactive discussion with alumni panelists, mixing honest dialogue, expert advice, and a helpful Q&A session to help students and alumni advance their career, learn more about a particular field, and more. My name is Alexa Schwartz. I'm the Assistant Director of Alumni Programs at the Office of Alumni Relations. And before we jump into our program, let me just share a couple of housekeeping tips. We will be taking questions during the session. You can submit those questions using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And you can also feel free to send a message in the chat like y'all are all doing. And we will be monitoring those. Hopefully we'll get to as many questions as we can. If you're wondering if this session is going to be recorded, it is recorded, and we will be posting the recording in a follow-up email as well as on our website, and we'll share those links. And lastly, there will be a short survey at the end of the webinar that'll pop up on your screen, and we really would appreciate y'all filling that out and sharing your feedback with us as we continue to develop our virtual programming. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Vanity Hill, who's going to introduce our other staff, students, and panelists.
Hi, everyone. I'm Vanity Hill. I'm Assistant Director of Alumni Regional Outreach here at Rice, and I'll be your moderator for today.
Awesome.
Hello, everyone. My name is Zane Zook. I am the Vice President of Professional Development with the GSA, also a third-year Mechanical Engineering PhD student here at Rice.
Hi, I'm Kim Gonzalez-Holt. I am an alumni of Rice University because I got my PhD here in biochemistry and cell biology, but I now work in the Graduate Postdoctoral Studies office at Rice.
All right. Thank you guys for coming. We're really excited to have our panelists here. I'm going to have them introduce themselves. We can start with Karen.
Hi, I'm Karen Book. I graduated from Rice undergrad in 2011. I was a member of Hanson College. Right out of undergrad, I went to the University of North Carolina for my PhD in sociology. And I should add that I also did undergrad in sociology as well. And currently, I have moved up to the Northeast. I'm living in Boston, where I'm working for Boston Public Schools as a senior data analyst in the planning and analysis department.
Awesome.
Okay, well, I'm Shawn Simmons, and I actually got my undergraduate in petroleum engineering from the University of Oklahoma, but found my way back to Houston, where I'm from, and attended Rice University for my master's in environmental engineering, and went on, as if I didn't have enough things to do, went on and got a PhD in environmental toxicology from Texas Southern University. Currently, I am the environmental and regulatory manager for our Sakhalin business unit, which is located in Russia, but I'm located here in Houston. Been with the company for 20 years and have had the opportunity to have a global experience working in Africa, Asia Pacific, Europe, and just about every country you could think of. So wonderful experience so far. In terms of Rice, I've always tried to stay connected. I've been on the board for the Center of Career Development and am a recent board member joining the Alumni Association. So happy to be here. And I love how she said that we are experienced panelists. Let's see if you still think that afterwards. So happy to be here.
Thank you, Shawn.
Is it my turn?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Kristjan Stone. I got my undergrad degree in physics at UCLA in Los Angeles, where I'm from, and then went to Houston for Rice for my master's and my PhD. Graduated 10 years ago, and since then, I have been a postdoc at JPL at Caltech for, well, that was 3 years, and then I've been an employee there for the last 7 years. And so actually just as of like a couple of days ago, I just got my 10th anniversary thing. So that's kind of cool. Yeah, it looks very much like this actually. But anyway, so I've been doing physics and low temperature physics for, I don't know, last 15 years or something like that. And I've been involved with Rice, I guess, ever since I graduated. When I was at Rice, I was involved with the Graduate Student Association for multiple years. And then since then, after I graduated, I came back on a fairly regular basis. Just, you know, one of those things that you consider is like, oh, I'll never come back here. And then you go back every single year for multiple years to keep in touch with people. And then I just rolled off as on the alumni board executive committee for Rice. So I will not be going back quite as often.
Thank you, Kristjan. All right, and so we'll get into the discussion. The first question I want to ask is, what made you want to go to grad school, and what factors did you weigh in your decision?
I can go. I think at Rice, I realized that you can study things for a living. And that was really interesting to me, really appealed to me. And particularly as somebody who didn't even know what sociology was as a field coming into undergrad. In the 4 years that I was at Rice, I realized not only was this a field I was interested in, but it was one that I wanted to pursue somewhat professionally. Now my path is taking me away from academia, but I still think I'm kind of practicing sociology day to day. So that for me was part of the reason that I wanted to go to grad school and get my PhD in that. And then the factors I weighed in deciding which graduate program to go to, I think I looked at all of the top demography programs. Demography is a specific subset of sociology and studies populations. So I looked at where the top ranked ones. I looked at who I wanted to work with, which I think is an incredibly important factor for deciding for a PhD program. And not just one person you want to work with, but multiple. I think having plan A doesn't always work out in terms of who you want your advisor to be or who you think your advisor should be. And so if you're going to a graduate program just for one person, they may leave. They may not want to work with you. You may not mesh well with them. So having a whole department that appeals to you, I think, is really important. So that was a lot of what shaped my decision to end up at UNC.
Well, like I mentioned, I did my undergrad in petroleum engineering and I had four internships in between with ExxonMobil. And so I fully planned and thought that after I finished my undergrad degree, I was going to get that great big fat offer from ExxonMobil and go to work in Houston. Well, part of that was true. I got a nice offer, but they wanted to send me to Midland, Texas. And sorry if there's anybody on the call from Midland, Texas, but I wasn't having it. So I had to pivot. I felt like I wasn't going to be happy in that location. And I had spent all my summers and all of my energy, I think, toward thinking that I was actually going to get a job in Houston, where I'm from, what I'm familiar with. I had all these grand plans, and then they wanted to send me to Midland, and I said, no. So I began to apply to graduate schools, and that's kind of how I fell into it. Sorry, I didn't do all the research and the rhyme and reason. I knew I wanted to be in Houston. I did some research on programs that I was interested in. And the summer before I graduated, I actually spent some time with a regulatory group in ExxonMobil. And that's how I got interested in the environmental side of things. And did a little research, applied, got in. My professor from OU actually had a relationship with one of the professors at Rice. So it kind of all worked out. So like I said, I'll be honest with you, I just didn't want to go to Midland, Texas. So I decided I would continue my education. But I also was thinking strategically, what else could I do to make myself more marketable, do things other than be in the petroleum and oil and gas industry? Because, you know, you have to go where the work is. And I fully understood that that was a consequence of what I had chosen. So I wanted more choices. And so I ended up at Rice and haven't looked back.
So I guess for me being in physics, it's kind of like you kind of have to go to graduate school, and at least if you want to continue doing physics. So unfortunately, I didn't realize that until like my junior year in undergrad, and then I did a internship at Caltech, and the other people were like, "Oh, you're obviously going to go to graduate school, right?" I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I guess I should," because the alternative was like, I don't know. I did a quick like, oh, I wonder what jobs there are, and it was like Raytheon, weapon system design. It's like, I don't think I'm okay with that. So I ended up applying to, I think, 6 places. I didn't really have a ton of time, so it's kind of like, oh, a little bit from the top, a little bit from the middle, a little bit from the bottom, and then got rejected from every single place I applied, which was really great. But that means that like, I think two weeks before I graduated undergrad, I got a call from our professor at Rice, and she was like, "Hey, if you work for me, I'll get you in." I was like, "Okay," because I don't have anywhere else to go. So I took one-way flight to Houston, and yeah. So, but I think you never really know where things are going to end up. That's also why applying to a variety of different kinds of places is very important. And you know, after being at Rice for 6 years, it's kind of like that decision was a good decision by being able to be flexible enough to just go. Because if I was like, oh no, I really want to stay in California, well, I would have been kind of screwed. So so it was more of I should go to graduate school to continue my degree, because if I don't, then I will just probably have to be kind of, you know, not apply the interests that I have. And I guess like the nice thing is that even if a PhD didn't work out after a master's, you can still stop. There's nothing stopping you from like forcing you to keep going. So, you know, it was that was the direction or whatever. But then once you get there, it starts getting comfortable.
Awesome. And I hope for those listening that it highlights that no one's path is the exact same. So there are so many different avenues to get to where you're going in life. Which leads me to my next question that was asked. Would you suggest that a student goes straight into grad school from undergrad, or that they take a break before they go into it?
Man, it depends. It depends. I will say you really need to have your end game in mind. I always tell people that to pursue a graduate degree, you need to have a why, because the why is what is going to keep you going when that day comes, when you want to give up, when you say, enough is enough. I don't need this master's. I don't need this PhD. Trust me, had that conversation with myself many times. But it really depends on your why and what you're trying to achieve. For me, again, I've mentioned, I felt like I needed flexibility, and having the additional credentials and studying a different area, I felt like would open doors for me, and give me choices to stay with going to energy, oil and gas, or to do consulting, or to do my own thing, whatever. So I really think it depends. And if you're a disciplined student, I'd say you probably could risk taking a job maybe for a couple of years, getting experience and coming back. If you're like me, I found benefit in being in that mode and staying on. But again, it really depends on the individual. Either choice, I tell students this all the time, whether you go straight through or whether you take a couple years to get some experience or even just take a break, you just need to have your game plan together and stick to your plan, because that's what's going to get you through, not whether you go straight through or take a break. It really depends on the individual. You just got to have that discipline. And what decision you make is going to be right for you.
Yeah, I think also it also is subject matter dependent. Like, for example, if I just stopped doing physics for a year or so, I'd be screwed. I just you forget all this stuff. So by keeping that momentum going is really important. Also, if I went and got a job where they paid me real money, I'd be like, why am I going back to school? Because you kind of but if you go straight through, you don't realize what you're missing out on. And it's kind of okay. You get that, I guess for me anyway, the nice thing about graduate school is it kind of showed me that I didn't necessarily need money, and money didn't really matter, which was kind of nice. You find other things to do with your time. And so that means that you can delay that until you're like, oh, I should buy a house.
Yeah, I want to just echo what they've said. I mean, I think about this a lot when I reflect back on grad school. And if I was giving anybody advice, is that if you're being thoughtful, it's really hard to make a wrong choice, because we don't know where life is taking us. We don't know what the future holds. We didn't know COVID-19 was going to strike and totally upend everything. So it's hard. All you can do is make the right decision for you in that moment and try to keep your options open. That's kind of my philosophy with a lot of things, but I think grad school is one of those things. And so I went straight from undergrad. I don't regret it. I also never knew my meager grad student stipend felt like I was rich, like I had my own money, I had gone straight from undergrad, so I still had my study skills. I had just taken theory classes the year before in undergrad, so it didn't feel like starting from scratch in a lot of ways. But then I also do wonder if I would have been able to discover myself a little bit more as a young adult, which I did a lot of that in grad school. But if I had done that before going to grad school, where would my life be right now? And I don't know, and I don't want to dwell on that too much. So, yeah.
I totally agree with that. Does anyone have any tips on the application process, like GRE, GMAT, or the subject tests?
So the subject tests are I think a lot of times if a field has a subject test, then that's the one that matters the most. The regular GRE is kind of hey, congratulations, you know how to do math, and you're compared to people who have done math maybe they hadn't done it for 4 years. So in that respect, if you're in math or or English or whatever, you have the regular test doesn't really matter so much. It's the specific one. And I have to say that at least the physics one was probably one of the hardest tests I've ever taken, and it destroyed me. So I think what also happens is that a lot of these bigger universities, they have so many applications a lot of the times that they have to filter out in some way. And for example, I was talking with the professor I was working with at Caltech, and we were talking about graduate schools, and she was like, okay, these are the realistic places you can apply because of what your score was, which by the way was absolutely terrible. But because of that, that meant that like a lot of these big schools, like say UC San Diego, for example, like they have so many people apply that they have to filter out some way. And even though the professors know that the number that gets associated with you because you took a test is kind of bogus and it doesn't really mean what you can do at the lab or whatever, it's still a number that they can apply to you so they can filter and cut people out. So like after applying there for like 2 weeks later, I got a rejection. And I was like, oh, they didn't read any of my stuff. So you kind of are it is important to try to do well at those kind of things, but it's also not the end of the world, because a lot of times with graduate school, say you get the top 10% of people get accepted to everywhere on the first run. And then once things trickle down, there's a lot of going back and forth. And there's also kind of a wild card situation where you can't plan for what's going to happen. So you might as well apply, and, like random stuff might happen and you might end up in Houston for 6 years.
Yeah, I just also, like, in my field, I know that GRE was important. I don't even know if I took a subject test. I don't think I did. But the letters of recommendation and like the personal statement and those parts of the application, I think working with a professor that you have a good relationship with is both good, because you get to like have that letter of recommendation that feels genuine, but also if they're invested in helping you get into graduate school, they like will probably read your personal statement with you and work on it. So I think starting that process early is super helpful. And so, yeah, deciding you want to go to grad school, probably like if you're going to go straight from undergrad, the summer before your senior year, if not sooner, starting to think about that process and starting to engage with your professors and mentors at Rice or wherever you're coming from to begin that process.
Awesome. Okay, next question is, what was your favorite part of grad school? And I'm mashing up two of them. And how did it differ from your undergrad experience?
I can go. Okay, so I guess for the first part, I was coming from a very large university to Rice, which is a very small private school. So that was a slight change, going from being a number, but having a lot of people to interact with, which was, there's pros and cons to that too. But going to, Rice, where it's just like, if you have a problem or have an issue that needs to be fixed, you talk to one person as opposed to 5. So that part was actually pretty great. In terms of like best part, I think the like really being able to, I think Karen mentioned this, where it's like you kind of like find yourself, and it's kind of like, I guess, what people do in movies when they're in undergrad, you get to do in graduate school. And it's kind of like an opportunity to kind of like, make very good friends, socialize, and all this kind of stuff, and be able to do stuff that you want to do. Like, for example, the nice thing for going for a PhD, for example, is that you get to be the one person working on a problem and being like that expert in the entire world. Granted, that problem maybe nobody cares about, but you get to be that person, which is kind of awesome. And I think something that seems to get kind of overlooked a lot with graduate school is that, like, you don't have to know what that problem is. You can go in there and just try something out, trying something new. Also, another thing is that, like, I think people tend to, at least from my experience when I was involved with the Graduate Student Association, is that people tend to feel very like their problem is the most important thing in the world. And I think it's very important to take a step back and realize that it's probably not. And it's great that you're excited about it, but for example, if you're at a cocktail party and someone asks you what you do and you start talking about it and then their eyes glaze over, it's probably means it's probably not a real problem. But that's okay. The other point of graduate school is to interact with other humans and learn how to have that kind of interaction. So, for example, at Rice, there's a lot of like being involved with the Graduate Student Association allowed me to plan a lot of events and a lot of parties and interact with people. And that skill set, I'm able to package that up and go to a place like JPL and be like, hey, look, I'm not just a robot. I can actually like interact with people. And it turns out that that's actually very important. Maybe JPL is a very special place where there are a lot of PhDs and you just kind of take for granted that everybody's intelligent and smart. But in that kind of world, what actually is the most important factor with who you choose to be on the team that you're working with is how they interact with other people, not if they're the smartest person in the world, because maybe sometimes those people are not fun to work with.
Thank you, Kristjan.
The question was what, can you repeat the question? I know I have to add.
It's a long one. What was your favorite part of grad school, and how did it differ from your undergrad experience?
Yeah, so I actually had the opposite experience going from Rice to a larger state school, and that I was like, oh my gosh, like basketball is important here. And I also was a swimmer at Rice. So I was an athlete. I spent like 30 hours a week doing my sport. And so I had the weirdest transition of going to grad school and suddenly having more free time, which I think is really not common. So I'm a little biased in this, but I think just to echo everything you just said, like the importance of, I was surrounded by so many smart people who really cared about the same things I cared about and had chosen to go to grad school or to be professors in a field that was super fascinating to me. So that was a great part of grad school. But I think I learned from being at Rice the importance of being like having a balanced life, and studying is important, but also social life is important and relationships are important. So I think that was, I don't know if it's different from my undergrad experience, but that's certainly something that supported me well when I made that transition, is that I had a great time in my classes with my cohort of fellow sociologists, but then my roommates were not sociologists. And we watched The Bachelor on on Monday nights, you know. Yeah, I remember, so this is a little bit of a tangent, but my first week, we were like all brand new grad students, and the head of the department came in and was like, throw away your TVs, you won't have time for anything but sociology. And I was like internally rolling my eyes and was like, I'm gonna prove you wrong. Like, but I think to that point, just having a balanced life is incredibly important, and you're not going to be able to succeed with your academics if you're not finding time for hobbies and relationships. And maybe for you that is not a TV. I have a hard time letting go of my television. Maybe for you it's sports, or you know, going to church, or whatever it is. I think it's just really important to have that balance to support your academic pursuits.
Well, I liked being able to chart my own course. You know, it was what I wanted to study. And, you know, I could carve out that area of my thesis that I wanted to focus on. So I liked that. And that was a little bit different from undergrad, because you kind of have a prescriptive way you have to do things. And then I just, you know, I really enjoyed my experience and took full advantage of everything that was on campus. And I discovered Valhalla, and that was such a different experience for me. I can tell you, I was floored when the professor invited us to meet him in Valhalla for happy hour.
Nice.
Yeah. Sounds fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so what resources did you find most helpful in your individual graduate school journeys?
Well, I'd say that the Graduate Student Association and the Physics Graduate Student Association, not as like a normal resource, but just like a outlet to kind of get away from just working all the time. And also, like, I guess like when I was in the group I ended up in, I was the only non-Chinese speaker for 4 years, and while that's great and everything, it also was a little isolating. So by being able to have an outlet to go and have interaction with, you know, other departments and other people was actually very important. So, you know.
All right. Okay, this one is a good one. Did you experience any sort of burnout towards the end of your graduate degree within your respective disciplines? If so, did that cause you to pivot to searching for a new career path close to graduating?
Okay, I can start because I have the story of a lifetime. So I started on the journey in 94. You can do the math, 94. And everything was going really, really great. Um, then, love got in my eyes. I got married, but I was still focused, And, but it was slowing down just a little bit, because I thought I was cute and, I had a man on my arm. So I got a little sidetracked, and I think it was 97. Yeah, early 97. I had a really bad case of heartburn. Like it was so bad. Cannot explain to you how bad it was. And so I went to the Rice clinic, and the heartburn actually ended up being my firstborn. So yeah, so I had, I was married, had my first, my son, trying to balance everything with the research. And so I did. I think it was, I want to say it was 98. I think it was one semester in 98. I just couldn't do it anymore. I was just at maximum capacity, and I took a semester off. And if I had to do it over again, I probably would have tried to push through, but for me, I really needed that semester break, and I had such great support from my faculty sponsor and professors, and so they stayed with me every step of the way in terms of staying connected and staying focused, and I really took the time to do something during that semester in terms of just getting refocused, getting myself a little bit more organized, having the help that I needed in terms of balancing the family life. So my mom came and helped with my son for a while, and it was really what I needed to come back. And within a year, I finished everything. So it can happen. Don't beat yourself up about it. I finally graduated, and I claimed December 99 because that is the day that they signed my thesis paper, although I think I actually graduated in January of 2000. But I'm claiming 99. And yes, something that probably should have took me maybe 2 or 3 years, took me 5 years. But I remembered my why, and that's what I was telling you all about earlier, that it's the why that will get you through. I did these things because I wanted to have a better opportunity for myself and for my family, and to learn new things and all those things. And so you have to go back and really leverage that why. So yeah, it happened to me, happens to the best of us. Just get back on the bike and keep going.
Yeah, I
Yep.
also had some experience with burnout, although for me it was not so much that I always loved sociology. I loved research. I loved my work I was doing every single day. I'll be honest, I was getting burned out with academia and publishing and what the tenure track kind of jobs valued. And to your point, Shawn, about the why, I had to think about why am I here? Why am I doing this? What do I value? And that led me on a whole soul searching up. I ended up still finishing my PhD because at the point I was having not even a quarter life crisis, I guess. I was already all but dissertation. So it was really just this I can finish this in a year, and I will, during that year, we'll figure out what I want to do with my life after. And I reflected on what I valued, and it was a lot of the things that academia as a career does not value. And I ended up in a career that values all the things I do value. We can talk about that more later. I think that's coming up. But yeah, I think the focusing on the why, what do you value? Why are you doing this? And I guess I also feel like there shouldn't be any shame if your burnout is real and it's because the why and the values have changed and they've left you and you need to move on with your life. I don't think we should have any shame for people who are who go down that path, because things change, right? But at the same time, maybe it's not that you need to drop out of grad school, but you need to take some time off, or you need to think about how your career is going to be different than maybe when you started your program 2, 3, 5 years ago.
Yeah, that's a good point, Karen. Just, no shame. You have to do what you need to do to get through it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's also important to not realize it's not like a sprint. It's more of a marathon. So like if you take a little detour, it's fine. Like right after I got my master's, I went to Japan to teach a course on nanotechnology for what was at the time the Nano Japan program, which was run out of Rice by one of the professors. And I, since I was going to be in Japan for those 3 weeks, I decided to go do research for the rest of the summer there, and that was very relaxing because it also kind of shows you what's important. Like, oh, I really like traveling and not being in the lab all the time, and that's incredibly nice. In fact, and going to what the others were saying about like finding that why. I think right around that time, my advisor brought me into his office and we were talking, and he like basically point blank said, "I don't think you're cut out for a PhD," which is something that's you're not really expecting from your postdoc, your advisor. You're just like, what? But basically, at that point, I was like, well, no, I'm going to stay here and finish this because I want to finish this. And that was the answer he was looking for. So it was a very bad test, but it was a test. So, and it kind of goes down to the whole like, if you're passionate about what you're doing and if you enjoy what you're doing, then it kind of doesn't matter what anybody says. And actually, you become so much more valuable as a student for that advisor because they know you're gonna do it on your own. You're gonna keep striving to do it, not because they're telling you to do it. So, yeah, I mean, I'd also imagine that there are probably better ways to find that information out. But
I totally got that test
yeah.
too. So I think it's a test.
Yep.
So we just gave you all who are on the call, you're going to get this test.
Yeah.
They're going to ask you. So you already know the answer. Just get ready. So
Yeah, you could lie about it. It's fine.
they are totally going to ask you.
Well, also another thing is what's kind of interesting is that just in general, statistically, people who go to graduate school, like the attrition rate is surprisingly high on a national average. Like you're looking at a 50% attrition rate. And that's not just saying that people go in and they're like, oh, I don't like this. This is not for me. And then they go do something else. It's more of like they go in, they decide they want to go to a different department. They want to teach. They want to do, life happens. They take some time off, whatever. So like I was initially like, oh, well, that can't possibly be true. But right before I was about to graduate, I sat down with one of the professors who at Rice, who's in the physics department, Dr. Dodds, and we went through the list of people that I entered with, and it was exactly 50%. I was like, oh, wow, I guess that's actually kind of true. So the important thing is also to apply, at least for for like the sciences and stuff like that. If you see yourself potentially in like a PhD program, you might as well aim for that, and then you could change your mind as you go. There's no restrictions holding you to anything. And I noticed there were some questions about pay. One of the tricks they also don't tell you is that if you go for a PhD, your master is covered. So you might as well go for a PhD and then quit and then get your master's as a consolation prize for free.
That was definitely part of my thinking, if I'm being quite honest. Definitely was like, I'm going to aim for the PhD. That's my goal. But if I drop out or not drop out, if I leave after my master's, I still have a master's and I didn't have to pay for it.
I wish I would have had this panel 3 years ago when I went back to school for my master's. So I hope everyone listening, this is a very, very, very important conversation to be a part of. This question is actually something that kept me up at night in the 5 years leading up to when I actually went back to school for my master's. Now in the positions that you are in, they tell you that, if you get a graduate PhD, if you get any type of graduate degree, it can kind of put you in a different pool of candidates as far as job searching goes. And so in your experience, either as a manager, supervisor, or as someone that's come into different positions since you've graduated, would you agree? And is there any advice you could give to those job seekers that are getting ready to graduate?
Well, like I told you, I felt like my master's and then eventually my PhD, for me was a differentiator. I don't know if it necessarily, got me in the door above another person or not. I think if you can point to credentials, but then also point to very concrete examples as to how you apply what you've learned, at least in my industry, that's been helpful. You know, we hire bachelor's degrees and they do quite well in our company. But I think what I learned as a result of having a master's and a PhD, that ability to basically be kind of a mini project manager. You know, I'm given a problem or I figure out a problem, I set up my milestones and, you know, my deliverables according to the schedule that I want. And then I work toward those, you know, by working with teams and working with people to get me the results that I need. And so being able to transfer those skills to the job at hand, I think has really helped me. It's less to do about the actual research. And I think, you know, it was mentioned earlier, if you start telling people about your research, you are going to lose them. They don't care about your research. But what they do care about and what they can resonate with are those skills and the things that you have learned and achieved along the journey. Like collaboration, working in teams, being innovative, you know, all these different qualities that I think comes about for a person who, you know, chooses to do graduate work, whether it's a master's or a PhD.
I think with like it also, you know, it very much depends on where you are working. For example, like at JPL, there's a lot of PhDs, and I know people who have come in with, like, say, a master's, which is great. It has its own little own path. But if you want to be one of those people who wants to be like a PI, or if you eventually have your own ideas and you're like, oh, I want to work on this one thing and I want to do a proposal for this and all this kind of stuff, like there's a glass ceiling there where if you don't have a PhD, you can't be the PI. So like a friend of mine had been working at JPL for 10 years. He came up with his own ideas. He wanted to apply, but he couldn't be the person in charge of his ideas, which is kind of silly, but that's just the way it works at some places. And so he ended up actually leaving to go to a different place so he could do that. But at least in some certain situations, there is a glass ceiling where if you don't have a PhD, you don't get a chance to kind of do what you want to do. You have to either do what other people want to do. Granted, I have a PhD, I'm working at JPL, and I'm being told what to do. It just also depends on what project you're working on. So, but yeah, like it just limits you. So it's like if you, kind of like what Karen was saying, like just if you shoot for the highest you could possibly go in your field, you can always like change trajectory as you go. So.
Yeah, I think there are certainly some organizations and some fields which having a PhD is like the job requirement. And there are lots of places, like the place I work currently, where if anything, it was like a hurdle I had to overcome and explain like why, not that I was overqualified. I don't think I'm overqualified, but I think there are people who are like, wait, why do you want to work here? You have a PhD. Like, shouldn't you be doing something, I don't want to say better because that's not how I think it is, but different or whatever. And so I think it's not so much that like I have a PhD, therefore I'm inherently valuable to your organization, because in some cases that's not true at all. It's more about what your PhD can bring, and exactly what Shawn was saying. It's like, I sold myself as somebody who knows how to do data analysis, really cares about equity and inequality, and I'm not a robot, to what Kristjan said earlier. Like I can get up in front of people and talk and explain my work and make it relevant to people who may not be trained data science people like I am. So I think there's a lot of value in a PhD, and then applying to careers post PhD or post any graduate program, I guess. It's not just that you're with the exception of some professional degrees, possibly, like just having a degree is not necessarily going to make you like the most valuable candidate. It's how you talk about what you did during your program and how you can turn that into like the soft skills, I guess, that are more relevant for many careers.
And it's also important to realize that, like, I've talked to people in the past where they're like, oh, if I get a PhD, then there's not very many jobs and all this kind of stuff. Like, well, that's true. You can't necessarily work at McDonald's anymore, but unless you lie, whatever. But the thing is that if you do get a PhD, then it opens up, say, 5 jobs in the world, but you're always qualified for those jobs. So they're going to be hunting you down. So if that lines up with what you want to do, then great.
Awesome. Very well said. Well, you guys have all given, such encouraging advice, but during these uncertain times right now, what words of encouragement or advice might you give everyone to approach their graduate school journey with confidence and resilience?
I just think it's what I said earlier. Your plan A often doesn't work anyway. The choices you make now are important and set you on your path, but I think there's a lot to be said about making an educated, smart choice in this moment and not limiting your options for the future, but also not being so concerned with what decision I make today. You don't have to, a 5-year plan is great, but come on, things are going to change. You're going to get off that 5-year path. So I guess there's just a lot of power in saying that, yeah, COVID is really hard and really making things extra uncertain right now, but there's always an element of uncertainty in life. And I hope it's empowering to hear us say that maybe we didn't know exactly what was going to happen when we started our graduate programs and the journey that Shawn went on, and she still ended up where she is today. So I think that there's just, a lot to be, I don't know, I lost my train of thought, but yeah, plan A doesn't work anyway. So set yourself up the best you can. Cross your fingers. I think that's something to be said a little bit, that a lot of grad school, I don't want to say it's luck, but as a sociologist, there's maybe some elements of privilege to it, that success isn't always about who works the hardest. But there's just so many things that happen anyway in a normal graduate path. So I think just know that you unfortunately may have it a little tougher now with the current global reality, but it's something that everyone has gone through. Everyone has struggled through graduate school and into their career. So.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, just don't give up. I think those who are planning on or thinking about or about to go into graduate school, think of this as an opportunity. In general, our economy is under attack. It's a lot going on. Well, this may be the most comfortable time and the best time and the easiest time for you to pivot from undergraduate to graduate school without a whole lot of, adjustments that have to be made. There are some adjustments, but maybe not as much as if maybe you were on a job and, not being able to, lose additional income or something like that may, influence your decision. And then for those who are in graduate school, think of it as an opportunity to reimagine how things are done. Here at work, I'm having to reimagine how we approach tough problems and how we pivot to survive, to answer the tough questions, and to figure out how we can be ready to take advantage of when things do turn. Because don't know the timing on it, but I do believe that there will be a time when things are very different. They may not go back to business as usual. I doubt that very seriously, but you have a unique opportunity to think about how you can reimagine your response when that does happen. So hang in there.
Yeah, so for example, for the great, I guess, recession in 2008, 2009 or whatever, I was in graduate school. It didn't affect me at all. I could see other people having a hard time, or maybe, but it's kind of like being able to shut yourself away in a bubble and then come out as a beautiful butterfly afterwards and have an economy that actually potentially is okay.
I love that. So one of our last questions is about the affordability of grad school. And I know everyone has had their own different journeys, but did you have any jobs while you were doing it? I know, Kristjan, we talked about this a little bit. And just as far as the affordability and being on your own and entering this new space of life, how did you handle that? And is there any advice that you can give?
Well, so I would recommend that if something to consider about where you go to graduate school, and is okay, if you go for a PhD program, there is a stipend. Sometimes there's there you have to actually pay for that stipend. Like for example, the way that Rice does it in the physics department is that the department covers your stipend for 1 year, or your first year, and then you like halfway through your first year for the next 2.5 years, you're a TA to kind of pay off that, and then after that first year, you're covered by your advisor's funding. So that's how Rice works. At Stanford, at UCLA, it's very different. But there is a way to survive. They pay you enough to survive. You might not get paid very much, but something to consider is cost of living in that place that you're applying. Like for example, at the time that I was going to Rice, I found out after I got there that apparently the physics department saw that they were losing a lot of people that were applying to say MIT or whatever, and that was because of the price. Like basically MIT had to pay its students more because they were living in Boston. But if you scale for cost of living, it turns out they were actually paying them less. So what the physics department did was basically like, well, we have money right now. Let's just raise our stipend to be the highest in the country. And strangely enough, that brought more people into Houston. So also, if you couple that with cost of living in Houston, it made it very easy to survive. I had a very nice apartment. I miss that apartment.
I was going to add that I actually got most of my funding externally. I applied for the GEM fellowship. It's GEM. It's a fellowship that targets STEM, mostly engineering, but I think it also covers STEM in general. And not only does it pay tuition, it also gives I thought a very generous stipend for that, back in the day. I'm old. Back in the day, it was a pretty good stipend. And I also used one of the resources on campus, and I can't think of the correct name, but they used to post a lot of external fellowships and things like that, either being offered by private foundations or through like the National Science Foundation. I think I got for my PhD, I was a part of the STAR program through the EPA, and it paid for tuition. It paid for, I think it was I want to say it was $2,000 a month stipend, and they paid for all my equipment and lab equipment and things that I needed for my research. So it was a good deal. I think a lot of people don't know about it, but it's GEM. And if you are a minority female like I am, they really love you because there are just not a lot of us who have advanced degrees. And I fully plan on, when I retire, to hopefully go and teach at Rice or a university like that, because that's really what I would love to do, to share my real world experiences with graduate students. So you can get it paid for. I did not pay a dime for my master's or my PhD.
That is amazing. Okay, and our last question is, and I kind of know the answer to it, but everyone else may not, but how do you stay connected to the Rice network? How did you stay connected in grad school and now as alums? I know Karen is my Boston president, and Shawn and Kristjan, you both have now had board experience, but is there anything else that you have done to stay connected?
Yeah, the board experience, and then I was the lead Rice recruiter for engineering for ExxonMobil, so that also keeps you connected. And mentoring students whenever I could. That I love that part. Just to give them the benefit of what you've learned, and to let them know that whatever they're going through, somebody else is going through it too, and they made it out just fine. So that's how I stay connected with Rice.
Yeah, I think the salary portal is super helpful for being accessible for people to reach out to. That LinkedIn, all this kind of stuff is really nice. I mean, I think, for example, like I'd go physically back to Rice and visit and keep in touch with people, because like especially right after you graduate, like at that time you still have friends hopefully that are there, and then you can keep in contact, go to beer bike, homecoming and things like that, and keep up those contacts. In fact, like it's kind of weird to think about, but like since I graduated, there were people who have had their entire graduate degree, all that experience, and I just had no idea who they were. But by actually going and like, going back on a fairly, like, say, a couple times a year, I was still able to keep contact with those people. And then, of course, over time they graduate. But, the people that still stick around are the professors because they have to. And so, like, for example, like I feel very comfortable going back to Rice because I've been going back for so long that I can just like show up, walk around on campus, still run into people that I know and have a great time, and go to Valhalla and be, creepy. But
Yeah, and I've been involved with the Rice Boston group, mostly trying to get it started and keep it alive. We have a lot of alumni in Boston, but for a lot of reasons, maybe we are so distant, geographically distant from Houston, or there's a lot of grad students in the area, a lot of transients, a lot of mobility. So trying to do social events first in person, maybe more virtual now. I also do alumni interviewing, which I really enjoy. It's a great way to, man, it makes me feel so old though. I'm like, what are kids these days doing? Are you on TikTok? And they just look at me like, I'm trying to impress you, you old lady. So that's a little off topic. But yeah, I do love connecting with future students, current students, alumni. And I don't know if this is the time for it, but if any of y'all are interested in graduate programs in social sciences or working for large urban public school districts, feel free to find me on LinkedIn or on the Sally portal. I would be happy to talk with people later as well.
Awesome. I want to thank Karen, Shawn, and Kristjan so much for this panel. I know that it's something that I would have needed. And so I hope everyone listening and watching found it beneficial. And so now I'm going to kick it back to Alexa to wrap us up.
Awesome. Yes, echoing that, thank you so much to our panelists. Vanity, amazing job moderating. Just a little golf clap from where we're all zooming in from. I hope that this panel just demonstrates the value of the Rice community as a resource for you, no matter where you are in your career development journey. I know we've got a lot of incoming students, current students, alumni, faculty, staff, and so we would just like to encourage you to take advantage of the Rice Network, and one of the ways you can do that is the Sally Portal platform, which several of our panelists have mentioned. It's a great way to make connections, offer and receive help and mentoring, and just stay connected with Rice. We're also working to support our Rice community that are all over the world through our virtual programming. And so we'll be sharing information about that in the follow-up email as well. And please don't forget to complete the survey. We really appreciate your feedback as we're figuring out this virtual experience. And I'd like to give Zane, if you'd like to talk a bit about the GSA, if there's any new or current graduate students that are interested in getting involved.
Sure. Thank you all for this panel. It's been wonderful. Just to echo that again. In our next GSA Council meeting on August 25th at 6 p.m. Central Time, you're all invited. There's information on that that'll be going through the GSA announcements, which all incoming graduate students should be getting, or on our Facebook page. And if otherwise you want to get a hold of the GSA or learn more, you can always reach us at gsa@rice.edu.
Great. And Kim, if you'd like to share any updates from GPS?
Sure. Yeah, so you can find out more about graduate and postdoctoral studies at graduate.rice.edu. My colleague Jennifer and I also head up a newsletter that we send out every other week, and it's called the Grad Student Digest, and that's usually to let you know about things that are happening at Rice or beyond the hedges, or now I guess beyond the virtual hedges. Yeah, I thought this was a great panel, and I found myself saying same things that the panelists said about grad school and getting a PhD. So thank you for doing this.
Awesome. Well, we are right at 1 o'clock Central. Thank you so much to our panelists, moderator, to Zane and Kim, and to all of the attendees for joining us. We hope to see you at a virtual event soon. Have a great,
Thanks, y'all.
See y'all soon. Have a great rest of your afternoon, everyone.